I had the entire day to myself. Outside, the weather was miserable cold, damp, and constantly switching between light rain and heavy downpours. I stayed indoors the whole time, playing video games and killing time the way I usually did on days like that. By the early evening, around 5 or so, the rain started coming down harder, and distant flashes of lightning lit up the sky every now and then. I made myself some dinner and figured it was the perfect night to throw on a horror movie, with the storm providing the atmosphere. I turned off all the lights and spent the next couple of hours stretched out on the couch. As the movie went on, the storm outside intensified. The power stayed on, but the rain was pounding the ground and lightning was striking close enough to make the windows shake. Before I realized it, it was already around 10 at night. I wasn't tired yet, but I stood up to stretch and grab a refill of water. That's when it happened. As I turned toward the hallway, I caught a sudden movement out of the corner of my eye, something dark, like a shadow sliding across the wall. It lasted less than a second, barely enough time to register. I stood completely still, my heart racing, then slowly walked over to check. The hallway was empty, nothing out of place. I told myself it was probably just the lightning outside, or maybe my eyes playing tricks on me after watching a horror movie in the dark. I brushed it off almost immediately. I filled my water bottle and glanced outside to watch the storm. The wind was violent, trees bending wildly, and the rain had turned the streets into shallow rivers. We don't usually get storms like that around here, so when they hit, they always felt intense. The town definitely wasn't built to handle weather like this. I went back to the couch and put on YouTube, hoping to relax and ease myself towards sleep. I wasn't really paying attention, just half watching, half zoning out. That's when I saw it again. Another shadow moved along the wall behind the TV. This time, it looked deliberate, like something standing just out of sight had leaned forward for a brief peek before pulling back. I snapped my head around toward the living room entrance. Nothing. I stood up and searched the area, checking every corner, but there was absolutely nothing there. Now I was confused and unsettled. Seeing something once could be brushed off, but twice, that wasn't normal. I wondered if I was more tired than I realized, but I didn't feel exhausted at all. What I thought would be a cozy, creepy night had turned into something genuinely uncomfortable. I kept telling myself it was nothing, but there was this quiet, nagging feeling in the back of my mind that refused to go away. After sitting there for another 15 minutes, unable to relax, I finally decided to call it a night and head to bed. I turned off the TV and made my way upstairs. Even after everything that had happened, I still wasn't tired. If anything, I felt more awake than before. Hoping to calm my nerves, I decided to take a shower before going to bed. I turned the water on and stood there, trying to slow my breathing and shake off the unease. I had only been in the shower for about 5 minutes when it happened. A sudden, heavy impact echoed through the house. It wasn't subtle, it was loud, aggressive, and powerful enough that I could feel it vibrate through the floors beneath my feet. I instantly shut the water off, my entire body trembling. I threw some clothes on as fast as I could. Without the shower running, the house went completely silent. No wind, no rain, nothing. The quiet was so thick it felt like pressure in my ears, almost like they were ringing. Carefully, I stepped out into the hallway, then slowly made my way down the stairs. I passed through the living room and into the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. The back door was destroyed. It was hanging open, barely attached by a single hinge at the top. Broken wood and splinters were scattered all over the floor beneath it. The other hinges looked like they had been violently torn straight out of the doorframe. Panic took over. I ran back upstairs, locked myself inside the bathroom, and called 911. While I waited for the police to arrive, I was convinced someone was still inside the house with me. But when the officers finally showed up and looked everything over, we realized something far more disturbing. The door hadn't been forced open from the outside. It had been ripped off from the inside. It looked like whoever had done it stormed out in anger, throwing the door open so hard that it slammed into the wall and ripped the screws straight out of the frame. That meant whoever it was had been inside my house the entire night. Those shadows I kept seeing, they were probably them moving just out of sight, freezing whenever I turned to look. I still don't know how long they were there, how they got in, or what they were doing while they watched me. What's even worse is how angry they must have been to destroy the door like that on their way out. I've never truly slept peacefully in that house ever since. This happened last winter. I don't remember the exact date, but I do remember that it snowed nonstop that entire week. The roads were bad, so I barely left the house at all. At the time, I worked a hybrid job, some days in the office, some days from home. Because of the weather, I worked from home every day that week, set up at a small desk in my bedroom. The house itself wasn't very big. It was a single-story place with just 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy. That day was long. I woke up, made some coffee, sat down at my desk, and didn't really move from that spot until around 8 p.m. Outside, the wind howled all day, and snow kept piling up. When I finally logged off, I made dinner, cleaned up around the house, and then stepped outside to roll the trash bins out to the curb. On my way back to the front door, something caught my eye. The snow along the left side of my house looked wrong. Everywhere else, it was smooth and evenly piled. But over there, it looked disturbed. I walked closer, and it didn't take long to realize what I was looking at. Footprints. A clear trail of shoe prints ran through the snow, right alongside my house. That alone was unsettling. But what really bothered me was how close they were. This wasn't someone just passing by on the sidewalk. I followed the prints along the side of the house until they suddenly stopped. At the end of the trail, the snow was packed down like someone had been standing there for a while. And that spot was directly beneath my bedroom window, the same room I'd been working in all day. It sent a chill straight through me. It had been freezing, windy, and snowing nonstop. Why would anyone be out there at all? And why would they be standing near my window? I was grateful the blinds were closed, but you could still see through the gaps if you tried. My desk sat right on the other side of that window. If someone had been there, they could have been watching me the entire time. I told myself I was overreacting. There was nothing I could do about it now anyway. I went back inside and tried to warm up, pushing the thought out of my mind. Since whoever it was clearly wasn't there anymore, I went on with my night and eventually went to bed around 11. Before sleeping, I checked the window one last time. The snowfall had covered the old footprints completely, and there weren't any new ones. That helped calm me down. I made sure the window was locked, then checked it again, just to be sure before getting into bed. I slept through the night. The moment I woke up the next morning, I went straight to the window. Any trace of sleep vanished instantly. Fresh footprints had appeared in the snow, right where the others had been. I threw on a jacket and boots and rushed outside. The tracks were nearly identical to the night before. They followed the same path along the side of the house and ended in the same spot, packed down beneath my bedroom window. I scanned the rest of the yard, but the snow around my house was untouched. No other footprints. No signs of anyone leaving. I went back inside, shaken. That's when I called the non-emergency police line and explained what was happening. I knew there wasn't much they could do, but I wanted it documented. If anything else happened, at least there would be a record. After that, I sat back down at my desk and tried to work, though it was impossible to focus, knowing someone had been standing outside my window. Throughout the evening, I kept glancing over at the window. As time passed, the falling snow slowly erased the footprints outside, and nothing else unusual happened. I finished work at 8 again, long after darkness had taken over. The wind was still cutting through the air, and the night felt bitterly cold. When I finally stood up from my desk, I walked over to the window and gently pulled the blinds aside. All I saw was smooth, untouched snow. The sense of relief was overwhelming. But just as I let go of the blinds, my eyes drifted downward and my stomach dropped. The window latch was open. It wasn't locked. I just stared at it frozen. I knew for a fact I had checked it multiple times the night before. I hadn't gone near it since. My hand shook as I reached down and wrapped my fingers around the handle. The window slid open effortlessly. My heart started pounding. The only explanation was that whoever had been outside had unlocked it during the night. And that thought led to something even worse. How had I not heard it? And more importantly, had they come inside? I slowly backed away from the window and stepped into the hallway, scanning every shadow, every doorway. I moved carefully toward the front door, grabbed my keys, shoved my feet into my boots, and bolted outside to my car. I called the police and stayed in the driveway. With the amount of snow on the ground, I doubted my car would have gone anywhere, even if I tried. The wait felt endless. About 10 minutes later, a patrol car finally pulled up. The officer went inside to check the house. I stood there in the cold, as time seemed to stretch unnaturally long. When several minutes passed without him coming back out, I knew something wasn't right. Then the front door opened. The officer stepped out, dragging a man in handcuffs behind him. Both of them were covered in blood. It was obvious there had been a fight. The officer told me the man had been hiding in a hallway closet and had attacked him when he went inside. The guy was in his mid-40s, with this unsettling, empty look in his eyes, something deeply wrong about him. There was no way to know what his intentions were, but it was clear he was dangerous. I still don't like to think about what might have happened if things had gone on any longer. I was staying in my parents' city over spring break, and for the first time, I decided to book an Airbnb. It was a small town, and the prices were cheap, so it seemed like an easy choice. After a 2-day drive, I finally arrived just after sunset. As I pulled into the driveway and started unloading my bags, I took a moment to look around the neighborhood, and something about it immediately felt off. The area was unusually dark and completely still. There were no streetlights, no people outside, no cars passing by. The house I was staying in was the only one with lights on. It wasn't even that late, yet almost every other home sat in complete darkness, except for maybe 1 or 2 faint lights far off in the distance. I figured maybe this town just shut down early. I went inside, unpacked my things, and settled in. I didn't have any plans that night. I just wanted to relax after the long drive and get comfortable in the rental. I grabbed some snacks and put on a movie in the bedroom. A few hours passed. It was probably around 9 or 10 when I heard a noise outside the room. I paused the movie and listened. A moment later, I heard it again. Someone was knocking on the front door. My first thought was that maybe the host had tried to call or message me, so I checked my phone, but there were no missed calls or texts. I got up and walked toward the front door. The knocking didn't stop the entire time, which made it feel urgent, like the person actually needed something. I opened the door. A man stood there, maybe in his 30s, wearing a black winter beanie and a worn red flannel jacket. When he saw me, he looked genuinely surprised. I greeted him, and he gave me an awkward half-smile before his expression went blank again. Without really saying anything, he muttered something under his breath, turned around, and walked back toward the road. I stood there for a moment, stunned, before closing and locking the door. I had no idea what to make of it. The way he knocked repeatedly, only to say nothing and leave, didn't make sense. I told myself maybe he had the wrong house and just didn't know how to explain it. I went back to the bedroom. The rest of the night passed without incident, and early the next morning, I left to spend the day with my parents. I didn't return to the rental until around 6 in the evening. I was exhausted, so I spent the night relaxing in the bedroom, watching TV. But around 9 again, I heard the same knocking at the front door. This time, I felt uneasy instead of confused. Once again, I checked my phone, nothing. I approached the door more carefully and looked through the peephole first. It was the same man. Same hat, same red flannel. I only opened the door slightly and asked what he wanted. His reaction was almost identical to the night before, except stronger, like he genuinely didn't expect me to be there again. He stared at me with a flat, empty expression. "No," he said quietly in a dull, emotionless voice. Then he turned around and walked away, just like before. I had no idea what that man wanted or who he thought lived there, but the whole situation was starting to feel genuinely unsettling. I went back to the bedroom, leaving the door open so I could hear anything happening in the house. Something about all of this felt wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling. A few hours passed. It was late, so I eventually shut off the lights and went to sleep. When I woke up, my eyes opened to complete darkness. The room was silent, and I could tell it was still the middle of the night. I didn't know what had woken me at first, but as I sat up, I started to hear something faint outside, maybe whispering or low voices. Then suddenly, there was a hard knock at the front door. It wasn't polite or hesitant. It was aggressive. The impact echoed through the house, making the walls vibrate. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway as the pounding continued. Moving slowly, I made my way down the hall. As I passed one of the windows on the opposite side, I caught a glimpse of movement outside, someone slipping past in the darkness. When I reached the end of the hallway and looked toward the front door, I saw him again. The same man from before. And behind him, deeper in the shadows, I could make out at least one more person, clearly trying to stay hidden. Adrenaline surged through me, making my hands go numb. I turned to go grab my phone but stopped instantly. A man was staring straight at me through the back window. Panic hit all at once. I ran back to the bedroom as fast as I could. Almost immediately, I heard footsteps outside, many of them, not just one or two. It sounded like a group moving quickly around the house. As I called the police, I could hear doors and windows being tested, handles rattling, frames shaking, people trying to get inside from every side. Minutes dragged by in absolute terror as I listened to them surround the house. Then, faintly, sirens. Within seconds of the sound, everything stopped. The footsteps vanished. The voices were gone. When the police arrived, they contacted the Airbnb host. Strangely, he seemed more irritated than concerned, which didn't sit right with me at all after what had just happened on his property. In the end, no clear answers ever came from it. Over time, my best guess has been that a previous guest at the Airbnb knew those men. They probably thought he still lived there, and when I answered the door, it confused them. Maybe they were angry with him, or looking for him, or assumed I was hiding him. It's also possible they were just unhinged. The host himself gave off strange vibes too. I wouldn't be surprised if the group had issues with him and tracked the address back to his name. Whatever their real intentions were, I don't think I'll ever know.